Let's talk about walls. Now, walls are not just some politician's symbolic entity to, keep one's outside enemies at bay. No, they're also, walls are ways of, politicians controlling each and every one of us, putting us inside little siloed brick things to control what we see, think, and do. Hi, I'm Rick. I am an American expat living in the satirical and mostly made-up nation of Nomadistan, a country that was born of adversity, who is still struggling, frankly, to find their way in the world. But they're actually making some really good progress, and the reason I became an expat here is because I think they have a really good chance at succeeding. And today, we're going to talk about what happens when sameness becomes law, when protest becomes a threat, and when even your own thoughts require a governmental permit. You see, in some parts of the world, and I'm not naming names, but I think we all know exactly who I'm talking about, protest has become signs of insurrection, and while real insurrection has become signs of patriotism, where troops are rolled out as some kind of stage prop in a dystopian three-part drama, where protest has been reclassified as disorder, and those walls we talked about, they're not just used to keep people out, they're actually used to keep us in our place, one obedient brick at a time. My fellow Nomadistanis and I, we've noticed something way across the pond, way to our west, over in a land that we call Supremistan, which is ruled by a guy named Trumo the Gold, and an agency that we're calling the Supremistan Department of Forced Conformity. I think they call it ICE. And we think they're making a very large mistake. Not in their endless rounding up of, non-vanilla looking people off of the streets, workplaces, and everywhere else they can think of, although that is a really huge mistake. No, we think their biggest foible that's about to hit them is they're going to run out of enemies pretty soon. Let me explain. There are only so many immigrants, so many gays, so many minorities, so many people to cast as the enemies of the state that, they're going to run out of enemies pretty soon. And then they're going to have to, turn on the faithful just to keep the rest of them faithful. Basically, they're going to have to turn against a larger portion of the population because they ran out of the smaller population to exploit. Because, as we all know, the pitchforks and the torches crowd, they love, nothing more than a nice common enemy of the state, especially if they come from within and need to be ejected out because, they like nothing more than a really good ejection. You see, we in Nomadistan understand that reframing peace as a threat is a really, really good, powerful political tool. And that sameness, encouraging and farming and grooming sameness, that's an equally powerful weapon. I mean, who doesn't want their neighbors for miles and miles of every direction to, look, smell, and think the same as they do? I mean, why else would we have created suburbia? But like we said, there is danger in sameness. There is danger in pushing away difference, which, brings us to those personal walls. We in Nomadistan have been studying Trumo the Gold for quite some time now, especially his desired erections between his country and the one below him, which to his credit actually worked pretty damn well with the great swaths of the easily led. Wall's good, went the myth. Just pay later. But thousands of kilometers of wall is expensive, and Trumo has been known to pinch a penny or two. He's not going to pay for them himself, so he came up with something, even more powerful. Personal walls. They're a lot cheaper to erect and, actually quite easy for the people to do it to themselves. So here was his political genius in action. Instead of putting up a big metal wall between countries, all he has to do is get people to erect walls around themselves, silos from ground to the sky, made with bricks of obedience. And that's probably the best part of all. I mean, worthy of Dr. Evil himself is he doesn't have to build his walls. His henchmen don't have to build the walls. The people are building them around themselves. Every brick with a label like faith and obedience and patriotism, and for some of the longer bricks, vanilla is good. Now, I would say that Trumo and his ilk are building these silos around the faithful rather quietly, but in actuality, it's rather loud. In fact, it is so loud that here on the other side of the world in Nomadistan, the din is just drowning out the quiet, peaceful tones in conversations in our tea houses. And frankly, we wish he turned the volume down just a little bit. Trumo is actually using an age-old magician's trick. Here, look at this hand over here because this one you cannot see. So while he's gesturing and bellowing loudly up here, people are just slowly building walls around themselves, giant silos that have reached so high that outside thoughts can never trickle in. And, the only thing they hear is, well, Trumo yelling down from the little top of the cone at them. And their world is what's inside those bricks. There is a myth that's as old as time itself, that sameness equals stability. Nations have been built on this for eons and eons and eons. It's a pretty well-trod path towards success. But the truth is, sameness really only serves the powerful. Well, at least until there's nobody left to control. In Nomadistan, they actually tried this once themselves, and it really worked, right up until it didn't. Let me tell you a story. In the very early days of Nomadistan, back when our borders were still drawn in chalk and half of our national budget went to tea and emotional recovery, we briefly listened and flirted with the seductive idea of the Great Harmonizing. It began innocently enough, a suggestion at a town hall meeting. What if we all wore the same robe, to feel united? So the next week, the Council of Clothing Compliance issued all citizens the official robes in 6 sizes in 1 color, which was a dusty unity beige. Those who wore blue by mistake were gently corrected. Those who wore orange were, they were publicly wept over. And then came standardized chant Thursdays, approved emotions Fridays, and the establishment of the National Awkward Hug. It only used one arm, no hip contact. You had to stay side to side, and basically you partied with a nod of understanding to each other. And soon, the streets were silent but orderly. Art was geometrically correct. The songs had no verses, only chorus, and everyone agreed on everything. Except no one smiled anymore. Well, not really. And then came the inevitable collapse. It didn't start with a revolution. It actually started with a shrug. People just stopped showing up. Not in protest, but in disinterest. The Minister of Morale actually resigned by falling asleep at his podium. And that's when we realized we weren't a nation. We were a checklist. Sameness had brought us closer. It had erased us, one perfect agreement at a time. So we burned our robes, rewrote the anthem to be more freeform, and made sarcasm constitutionally protected. And that's how Nomadistan learned that stability isn't built on sameness, it's built on difference that doesn't require permission. In some nations, peaceful protest is considered open rebellion, and dissent is considered something worse. The saying goes, if you're not smiling and saluting, then, you're already pretty suspicious. Whereas real and violent uprisings, they're considered misguided but enthusiastic patriotism. Sadly, historically speaking, you only need one drum and a very clever sign to terrify an insecure government. The original citizens of Nomadistan, they've actually read the guiding documents of the land far of which we speak. And they were very confused by the first paragraph, which read, Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or the right of the people peacefully to assemble, or to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Now, English is not the first language of the people of Nomadistan, but it seemed fairly clear. After all, the founding fathers of Supremistan, they put this at the very, very top. You're allowed to say what you think and feel. You're allowed to ask the government to do a little better. They thought it was so important that they put it right above the one that said it's okay to shoot up institutions and schools. Now, because of this, the fine people of Nomadistan, they thought they could help. They assembled a council of elders, a whole bunch of tea merchants and a goat named Sally. And they came up with the idea of how they could provide assistance to that land across the sea that was suffering from the personal silos being created. And they came up with a very interesting idea. Mirrors. Yes, mirrors, those little shiny panels that actually show you a reflection. The idea was to allow the citizens of Supremistan inside of their silos to hang them on their walls, where they could actually see themselves for who they are and not what the voice from the top of the silo was telling them to be. Because you see, what a terrified and insecure government fears most, well, it's reflection. But unfortunately, as we were getting ready to package up and UPS over our mirrors, Trimo the Gold, he got wind of our nefarious plan. And even though the mirrors were free, he put such a tariff on them that, well, frankly, nobody could afford to send them. So we all fell back, we regrouped, and we came up with another idea. We'll send cookies that taste like disagreement. We have a question for Supremistan. As our previous story kind of foretold, what happens? What happens when you run out of enemies, when you run out of people to point at and say, they're bad? What happens after you win the battle of sameness? Doesn't power require opposition in order to keep its grip? I mean, when there's no dissent remaining, aren't you just going to eat yourself? What we have noticed from our sand dune-based observatories high above looking towards the west is that they first come for those who can't defend themselves. And when they run out of them, they come out of those who are, well, just slightly different. The ones who put pineapple on their pizza. But eventually, the tides of sameness will sweep away all differences, and what will remain will be homogeneous and vanilla and uniform, just as the engineers designed. But what then? You still don't have perfection, because perfection can never be reached, or rather, more appropriately, perfection cannot be maintained. Once this vanilla nirvana is actually achieved, there's no more power to be had by trickery. It's just simply the end of the line. There are no more shoulders to stand upon and push down under the water so that you can feel like you're standing taller. And then there are the ones who have so lovingly self-stacked those bricks of obedience all around themselves. Yep, they will indeed survive the coming apocalypse of the greater right. But when the lands are cleansed and the troops can find nobody left to fight, they're going to have to look within. They're going to have to look for divergence inside those silos, and those brick silos of faith and obedience and patriotism, they'll slowly start crumbling down. And one by one, the occupants, they're going to be plucked and used, because power needs enemies. So all of those who consider themselves us and not them, they're going to understand that there's a very, very fine line when it comes to the people that you worship, respect, and believe care about you. Well, they really don't. Okay, all satire aside, this is not about one country. It is not about one person. It's not about any one thing. It's about those in power wanting to simplify and distill everything into one shape that serves them and only them, leaving the rest of us just sitting in cages of various colors. And this comes in so many flavors. You have one nation that really should know better because of the atrocities that have befallen them in the past. And now they just simply worship a man who wants to turn the tables and become the oppressor that once oppressed them. Honestly, the people really should know better, and they should know shame. But then again, over in Supremistan, they have this belief that everybody wants to be just like them, that everyone wants to grow up and be powerful and rich and worship money. And then we start believing and following in a man and a party. And everything else that simply says, if you believe as we do, it too will befall you. Or at the very least, you can watch us spend our money and you can pretend like you're kind of living under our roof. And that's why I created Nomadistan, this wonderful nation state without borders that prefers to engage in discussion rather than live in cowed silence. We may not like what other people have to say, but As long as you listen with open ears and watch with critical eyes and think for yourself, not just regurgitate sound bites from, well, frankly, entities who are monetizing you and trying to make, well, turn you into their product. Kind of forgot where I was going with this. I can get into a big rant on all of that. But no, I created Nomadistan because there is this endless battle going on. And it serves the powerful, and it serves those who are, like I say, monetizing us. Because as long as we're yelling and screaming at each other in our little siloed walls filled with those who think like us and the trolls who want to fight against us. And so I wanted a place where, well, you had a side door where you could come in to the center of it all instead of just screaming at the locked doors at either extreme end. In Nomadistan, we will always put humanity first and keep a hand out holding the door shut against those who just want to corrupt with power. Because building walls on top of imaginary dotted lines, it is not what moves us all forward. It is not what is good for the people, for humanity, for the planet, for all of us. So yeah, there is a country called Nomadistan, and you are welcome to become citizens. We have no borders. We have no entry fees. We welcome all poets, gentle people, architects, thinkers of all persuasions. If you love somebody, come to Nomadistan. If you want to have a lively discussion, come to our tea houses. I built this nation not to be powerful, not to be, I don't know, omnipotent. I actually don't know what that word is. I didn't build it to be anything other than a place of discussion, a place of love, and most importantly, a place where we can all be civil, where we can remember that we all share the same DNA, we all share the same goals, and that if I help you and you help me and we all help that person over there, all of our lives are better. So, if this episode of the Nomadistan People's News actually made you smile, cringe, get upset, argue, drop a note in the comments somewhere. Come find us. Out on Substack is where you'll find all of the articles. And in fact, there's a link below to the article which drove this particular episode. As you probably know, you're either watching this on YouTube or listening to it on a podcast. And if you want the other variety, just head out to rickhiggins.com and you'll find links to, well, everywhere that we are. And in fact, if you want more details on what Nomadistan really is, how we came about, well, the Ministry of Archives also lives out there at rickhiggins.com. So, thanks for coming by. Share, like, comment. You know the drill. Every little bit that you do helps get this message out to others. I'm assuming you like the message. Otherwise, you wouldn't have gotten this far in the broadcast. Thanks for listening, watching, and/or reading.